All right, welcome to Hygiene
Okay.
Elevated Conversations and Innovations. Today we've got Katie with us. Katie, thanks for being on the show.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, doing great. Katie is here with us today, and we're going to be talking about autism and depression, both as the clinician and the patients. So I'm really excited to see what you've got to share with us tonight. Um,
I hope I don't disappoint.
I doubt you could. Katie, can you share with us your personal experience with being an autistic dental hygienist and struggling with depression? Like, how has that impacted your work and daily life?
I guess I should start off by saying that I didn't actually know I was struggling with these things for a very long time. I know that I struggled with comparisons, especially my first year as a new hygiene, a new grad, is like comparing myself to my classmates who were my friends, and they could all do 45-minute appointments and they were great with it. And I was like, I suck. I feel like I can't get good care. Like, I feel like I'm just struggling all day. I'm behind on my notes. And so I really struggled with stuff like that. I quickly realized that busy environments do not work well for me. I just chalked it up to this doesn't work for my personality. And so, once I found a nice, calm environment, I found an office. It was one doctor, one other hygienist, one office manager. Like, it was a very calm environment. I was like, oh, this is what I need to be successful. And I need 1 hour appointments for all of my patients. That really helped me. And one thing that I knew that I struggled with, but I didn't realize I was autistic until about 7 months ago. So, I was just kind of
Wow.
figuring out things that annoyed me in practice. Like, I knew that the sound of the ultrasonic and sterilization drove me crazy. This was like 5 years ago, and I was like, I need some earplugs. Like, this is annoying, and I can't concentrate. And back then, I felt embarrassed because I was the only person on the dental team who was taking these accommodations, and so I stopped wearing them after about a week because everybody's like, "Why do you have those in? What are you wearing those for?" And it made me feel different, so I stopped. But I've just learned as a hygienist that I really need to seek out moments of quiet. That is a huge thing for just allowing me to feel like centered and calm throughout the day. So I frequently will eat lunch by myself. Like, it's not that I don't want to hang out with my dental team members, but I just need to just decompress. And so I'll join them for lunch sometimes, but I'm usually just by myself a lot. It's just what I need.
Well, Katie, I think that's fantastic that even without like your diagnosis
Mhm.
yet, you still were aware of your surroundings, your environment, and coming up with these solutions. I'm really sorry you felt like you had to retire those noise canceling headphones so soon.
I know.
Did you bring them back out yet? Now that everything's all
I
okay.
did. Yes. The nice thing is that there's companies now that really acknowledge that people have sensory sensitivities, especially with sound. So, like Loop and Calmer, there are different companies that offer these products, and they're much more discreet. They're not like the bright orange foamy earplugs like I was using back then. So these actually look kind of fashionable, and yeah, I'm not like embarrassed to wear them. And I'm like, oh, it's just really noisy in here. This just helps me. It's very easy to take the accommodations, I think, when I can do it in style.
Well, Katie, I actually have noise canceling headphones that I wear in clinic too sometimes. Once in a
Oh, do
while,
you?
the ultrasonic will just have my ears ringing, and I'll be like, I'll be right
Mhm.
back, and I just go grab them, plug them in, and back to business. So, um, yeah, I use them too. I think they're
I
very,
feel
very
like I'm getting to a point where I would love them just for like more the
Mhm.
damage than the sensory, but I've been noticing that I'm noticing the sound more than I ever did before. So I think they're a great
Yeah.
idea for sure.
Well, and that's one thing. I mean, we know that as hygienists, it's damaging long term to our ears to
Hmm.
constantly be having all of these sounds of the dental office all the time. So it's almost like that should maybe be part of our armamentarium that we're using in clinic.
Mhm.
And so if we can even kind of make that more of a common thing, I think that that would really benefit all of us,
No,
to not make it such a
I'm
taboo.
here for it. It's kind of funny now after 8 years of hygiene, I have trouble hearing my family sometimes. I'll be like, if I'm the dishwater, if I'm doing dishes and the water's running, or the fan for the oven's on, I'm
Uh-huh.
like, what? And they're like, Mom, I said.
Mm.
They get like so upset repeating
Yeah. Can't you
themselves.
hear?
I'm like, I'm sorry, guys, I can't hear well.
Yeah.
Gosh. So, Katie, you gave a couple really great examples of like things that really brought to your attention um, the notice that you were just processing differently. Was there kind of
Hmm.
one specific thing, or was it a bunch of things that kind of culminated to your diagnosis for autism?
So this is something, I don't know if this warrants like a trigger warning on your podcast, but so I have always struggled with suicidal thoughts. So I attempted suicide when I was 16, and that was the
Oh
biggest thing.
gosh.
Like my husband has told me since we had kids, he's like, I really think there's something going on, Katie. Like sounds are really bothering you now. Like this just seems more extreme than it was in the past. And I don't get sarcasm either. So I just always thought he's like being mean and like making a joke at my expense. But when I started
Mm.
learning about my son's neurodivergence, he has ADHD. I started seeing a lot of myself in that, and so I also firmly believe that I have ADHD as well, and I'm awaiting evaluation for that. But like, just I recognized a lot of myself in that. And then when I saw the statistic that females with autism are 6 to 8 times more likely to attempt suicide, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, oops, my earphones just did something. But I'm like, this is this like explains why I've struggled with so much in my life. Like with just when life gets overwhelming, I just want to check out. It's not like I don't want to be alive anymore, but I'm just so overwhelmed by all the pressures and all the needs and all the demands of life. And that was really the big thing for me. That's like, oh my gosh, this is it. So it was more of a life thing, like with the pressures of daily life, and figuring out about my son's neurodivergence. That's like the big thing that just kind of culminated me finding out this thing about myself that I've struggled with for 20 years.
Wow.
There's a delay. I can't see any of you now. It's like frozen.
Oh, bummer. Okay.
Oh, okay. All
Oh,
right.
we're
There we
up.
go.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Yes.
Katie, I want to thank you for just being so open and real and honest with us.
Mhm.
I don't, I'm not sure how many people would be so open about their history with suicidal thoughts. So just thank you for bringing like the raw
Yeah.
truth to the table tonight. I really appreciate that. Um,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm so sorry that you've had those types of struggles in your life, though.
Well, the thing that really is hard, and I guess that's why I'm such a big proponent of like advocating and just awareness, is because I was 16 when that happened, and I never felt safe to share it with anybody until
Mm.
like anybody that didn't already know. I mean, I had my friends from hygiene or from high school who knew, but like when I was in hygiene school, that was the first time. It was 9 years after the fact that I told anybody what had happened to me. Like, and it was after a class where we learned about patients with depression, and I told her like, I have depression and I've been taking medicine for 9 years, and like I attempted suicide when I was 16. Like it just never felt like something I could share because nobody else was talking about it. And I felt so alone with it. And I was the only person I ever knew that was young, that was taking antidepressants, that like had thoughts where they didn't want to be alive. Like, and I'm sure that those people were out there, but nobody was transparent about it. And as a parent, that's my fear, is that my son will struggle with those same things. And so I just want the world to be a kind and accommodating place. And I figure the only way that things might change is by being transparent and talking about these things and normalizing it. And really, I just kind of do it for my kids.
We do everything for our children. I love that. I
Yes.
love that, Katie. They're they're the most important. I've I feel the same. Well, let's see, Katie, in your opinion, what are some ways dental professionals can better accommodate patients with autism or depression? What specific tools or training programs do you recommend?
So for training programs, I think that it's really important to just like listen to autistic voices, listen to neurodivergent voices. So people who have ADHD, like just educate yourself on how other people live. Because if you don't understand it, sorry, can you hear that when it says the Google Assistant is not connected?
Oh,
You can. Okay, sorry. Okay, but I really just think listen to people that are different from you. I follow a lot of creators on social media, so follow mental health accounts. I mean, these are you're going to hear a lot of people sharing their experiences with feeling different and the struggles that they have with navigating everyday neurotypical life. And I really just think that that's a big, easy way that you can do it. As far as like any courses or training programs, I haven't found any, so I'm working on one myself right now, and that's it's in the works. I'm hoping to have that ready by the fall so I can present, starting here in Maryland with other dental practices, doing CEU courses, just to try to educate people on us neurodivergent people.
Katie, that is so exciting and so cool that you're doing
Mm-hmm.
something
Yeah.
outside of the dental op. That is
Yes.
fantastic that you're putting educational material together for other providers. I
I'm
actually
trying.
wanted to share about a patient of mine that was
Hmm.
nonverbal autistic, and I was
Hmm.
able to be his hygienist for 4 years. And it kind of started as I was his parents' hygienist, and as they were telling me about their son, and I'm like, well, he's old enough to come to the dentist, bring him. And they were so skeptical and so nervous about bringing their son in, and I said, okay, you tell me what he needs and we will do it. So we actually would schedule him during my lunch breaks, and we would turn the lights off in the facility, like in his area, and um, I would just work with my loop light, no overhead lights on, and um, he was just like I think five when I first met him. And every appointment, it was like we could get a little bit more done. Like he'd let me take x-rays, and then he'd let me, maybe the next time we could like polish a couple teeth. Like he very slowly, but um, about 2 years in, we could start doing the full appointment sequence. And
Hmm.
this little boy just like stole my heart. I just loved him so much. And one day asking his parents, I'm like, well, his mom particularly, I was cleaning her teeth and I'm like, hey, do you guys ever go on any dates? Like now that, your son, you're his primary caretaker, do you get to go spend time with your husband? And she's like, no, we haven't been on a date since the day he was born. And I'm like, no, you guys need a date. Bring him to my house and you guys can go on a date. So, and this is the only patient I've ever babysat, by the way. But yep, like making arrangements like, hey,
That's
come
good.
over. I will watch him on this Saturday. You guys can go to dinner.
Uh-huh.
And then they'd say, like, oh, he's not having a good day. Like, let's reschedule. I'm like, okay, next weekend. So we rescheduled like 3 times till they felt like their son was having an okay day to come hang out. And this little boy had an absolute blast at my house. He was like banging on the piano keys. We had a little kiddie pool out in the backyard, and I had said, like, bring a swimsuit. And before we could even change his outfit, he just dived right into the pool. Just had a blast. My kids enjoyed him so much. And when I was getting ready to leave this dental office, that was the one patient that was like the hardest for me to leave. I'm like, oh, I've made so much good
Mm.
progress
Yeah.
with this little boy and I care so much about him. Um, you know, and I so now I get sad talking about him because I really, really do miss him. But I'm sure his next hygienist is
Yeah.
doing great on his progress as well. I hope they're successful still. But those are some of the things that I would do
Yeah.
with him was the lights. He wore his headphones. Um, and actually to get those x-rays, we would take one x-ray and then his parents would bring in candy corns. Those are his favorite candy. He'd get a candy between each film, which sounds counterintuitive. The hygienist is feeding candy, but it worked, and he did not have to pay in those x-rays. Are there any Katie, any other tips that you think would be helpful?
Well, it sounds like you covered a lot of things. You kind of did desensitization over a few appointments. He had the headphones, so that helped with background sounds. You dimmed the lights, that's fantastic. Offering sunglasses or tinted safety glasses to your patients can be helpful. Also, like I always go everywhere with my little squishy, so maybe offering something for his hands to fidget with, or your patient's hands to fidget with while they're in the chair,
Mhm.
and even a sound machine for your room could be helpful. So if you have kind of sometimes you can get ones that have different sounds, so it just sort of drowns out the sound of those other dental sounds in the background. You could get something like ocean waves or rain that might be calming or soothing to your patient. And also, if you can, maybe work in an area that's out of the path of a lot of people. I know like a lot of sounds of people talking can be really distracting for me if I hear that in the background. So maybe just kind of an out of the way area of the office might be a little bit more calming for patients. But it sounds like you were off to a really good start.
Yeah, those are great additions though. Those are great ideas.
I worked at an office and we kind of had an official room that was fairly ideal for our autistic patients that we had. We had a number of kids that were autistic, and it was a room that was a little bit set away from, you know, the hustle and bustle of sterilization, the front office, and the other hygiene and the other three um, doctor's operatories, and it had a 50-gallon fish tank in it. So it had that automatic
That's
like
awesome.
hum of the pump. Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
fish are the most like therapeutic thing to watch. And there was natural light in that room. And yeah, just my loops because I didn't really have great overhead lighting. But we offer
Mhm.
the sunglasses as well. But that room was like the like kid whisperer because of the goldfish that were in that room, but it was kind of our designated, okay, this is
Yeah, it
where
can.
we need to put our patients, and especially for consistency as well, right? Because I think new is a little bit of a trigger as well, so we tried to be consistent in where we were putting those patients.
Did you ask me a question? Your mic cut out. Sorry.
Oh no.
I heard. I think you said emergency patients.
Oh, you didn't hear any a thing that I said?
It was like jumbly. Sorry. Maybe
Oh
I'll
no,
stop you next time and say, hey, it's I have a bad connection.
man. um no,
But I heard
so
about the fish
our
tank
Oh, okay.
and the natural light.
Um, Natural light. So we just tried to be very
Yes.
consistent with the room and the
Yes.
provider for those patients.
That can definitely help. Also, so many dental offices, they're just so brightly lit with all of these fluorescent lights and it just
Mhm.
it hurts my eyes. So yeah, natural light is great. Dimming the lights if you can. Some offices are a little bit kind of hampered by that because you have a lot of sensor lights now. So that's why it would be really great if you had a designated room that you could work out of, where maybe the lights are always kind of kept dim or low, as an option.
I think those are very
Katie, I'm
practical
kind of
things you can
wondering,
do.
oh, are we both talking, Amanda?
No,
Katie,
I
I'm kind
just
of
said I
wondering.
think those are great practical things.
Yeah.
No, they are. And Katie, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the depression. When we're going over these health histories, do you have any like great verbiage to kind of open that depression conversation? I know some providers see the depression box marked or mental illness marked box and just kind of glide right over it because they may not have that confidence to like have that conversation with somebody. Like, can you share with us how you kind of
Yeah.
open that conversation and ask them a couple questions about that?
So I guess part of that fear comes from it being uncomfortable, but I just always kind of approach every patient like I don't know, I guess I use my own experience. So I don't beat around the bush with it. Like I see that you have depression marked. I see that you're taking medication. Um, is home care difficult for you? Like I really kind of want to get to that because I know that for me, I'm a hygienist, but when I'm deep in a depression, brushing and flossing my teeth is the last thing I care about. Like, I don't care.
Mhm.
And so I know that if I'm struggling with that, my patients are probably going to struggle with that. So, in order to not seem super invasive about it, I just ask how it's affecting their home care because oftentimes you'll find that it is. If a patient is, kind of struggling, maybe they've lost their job or somebody's passed away, or maybe it's just life stress. Like I said, I didn't know I was autistic, and that created many periods of burnout for me throughout my life. But there could just be a lot going on with our life, and those activities of daily living, like brushing and flossing, become impacted. Even if you're taking your medicine every day and you're speaking to a therapist, taking care of yourself can still feel hard. So I think an easy way to bring it up is just bring it back to the oral hygiene. How's your oral hygiene? Has that become impacted at all? And always speak to your patients like you really care. I think when people can sense that you actually care what's going on with them, then they're not afraid to reveal anything because they feel safe with you. So I just always try to help my patients feel safe and let them know that this is a safe space. And sometimes if I have a patient who might seem kind of, how you get a vibe from a patient, maybe they don't want to talk about it with you. If I see that they have a medication that they take, I'll say, "Oh, I see you take sertraline. Has that like caused you to? Are you clenching your teeth more? Because I take it, and I noticed that it definitely causes me to grind my teeth a lot. Has that been your experience?" So relating it like that can be helpful too if you take those medicines.
Amanda, what's your go-to when it comes to discussing mental illness and depression with the health histories?
I think for me, just kind of like Katie was alluding to, like finding that way to make somebody feel comfortable. Like, oh yes, this if I know they're on a medication, I struggled with depression for a period of time, not long, but a period of time, and I will kind of share what that was like with the patient, just trying to take that maybe discomfort or perceived stigma off for that patient, and really try to relate and not try to make them think that I'm just probing into their life, but I do want to know. And I think that's a really good um, way that Katie had mentioned to relate it to oral hygiene and to your health, because how often do we hear patients say, "Oh, well, I'm not taking anything that's affecting my mouth." And it's like, "Yes, yes it does." Whether you realize it or not,
Yeah.
yes it does. So, I think that's a really good tip of, just for instance, whenever you're sick, one of the last things you ever want to do is brush or floss. You just don't care. So with depression, yeah, that's going to be like not one of your top 10 things that you want to do is brush your teeth, and that's a very very impactful thing. So I think that was a really
Hmm.
good go to,
Well,
Katie.
and another thing is like it's also an easy thing to feel shame about, like to admit that you're
Mhm.
not taking care of yourself in the most basic ways, or like you're not showering and you're not doing those things that typical people do, and it becomes really hard when putting your feet on the floor in the morning is the hardest part of your day. And so like doing those other things, it's just extra steps, it's extra stuff. And when you go to a dental office and you feel like they're picking on you for it, it's
Yeah.
just another thing to feel guilty about. Like, oh, I'm not, I can't even do this right. Like, so yeah, try to foster this sense of safety with your patients, and they are safe with you and they're not judged by you. And,
Mhm.
you know, if you can ever share a personal experience, like, yeah, I struggled during this time, you know, maybe that can help them feel more comfortable, without
Mhm.
trying to minimize what they're going through.
Right. Right.
Oh, one thing that comes to mind for me is, when I've been seeing the patient regularly, and then all of a sudden there's this change, right? They're healthy all the time, and then all of a sudden there's like plaque and bleeding and all this stuff. I'm like, whoa, what is going on? Let's talk about this. What has
Mm-hmm.
changed? And it usually is um, something stressful happening in their life, laid off from their job,
Mhm.
or a death, or it just plays a huge role on their oral care in general. So when I identify a
And
change,
but
yeah, I'm like, let's
yeah,
talk about it. Let's just talk about it so then we can try to help you.
well, and that's where really thorough documentation comes in, because the data doesn't lie. You know, if you check your perio each visit and you notice that these threes are becoming fours and fives, okay, something's happening here. Or yeah, your check your last gingival description and you can see a very obvious difference between then and there. It becomes very easy to bring up those conversations, because you're like, well, I'm noticing a change here from my last visit. Last time, I'd say that your oral hygiene, it was very good. And today I'm noticing a lot of areas of plaque. I'm noticing a lot of bleeding. Yeah, what's different? What's happened? What's different in your life? And that usually always opens up the door to a deeper conversation.
Mhm. And they're always amazed that you can tell their stress when you just take a look and start probing. They're like, "How did you know?" And I'm like, "Well,
Yeah,
it's obvious for us."
the data doesn't lie.
No, it doesn't. And I feel like the whole takeaway here is like empathy and compassion are like the
Mhm.
secret to communicating well with your patient in these particular situations.
Yes.
I think those are very I think those are very, essential traits of any healthcare provider, that personability and empathy and compassion. Um, I don't wanna say it's kinda sad that we have to say that, but it should just go without saying, but I think we always need to be reminded, yeah, we need some more empathy and compassion, because you don't know what kind of battle people are facing if you have their health history or you don't have their health history. You just don't know what people are going
Yeah,
through.
you don't. And I think it's really easy to forget that, especially if you're maybe in an office that moves very quickly and you're getting patients in and kind of getting patients out. And something's got to give. And sometimes it is those deeper conversations with your patient about what's really going on in your life. And if you can help kind of nudge them maybe towards getting help, talking to somebody about it, talking to a therapist, that's really going to have a big impact on not only their oral health, but I mean, systemic health, but just their life. And like you said, Amanda, we are kind of the first people to notice these things because we see a change in their mouth, and
Mhm.
they might think that they're holding it together and nobody's seeing it, but sometimes we're the first people to recognize it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have either of you guys had the like suicide conversations with patients in the chair?
I've only It's only happened with patients who have shared it with me. I haven't brought up my personal experience with it, but I certainly wouldn't be opposed to talking about it with a patient if they asked.
I had
I don't think I've ever had a patient, tell me about suicide, but I've mentioned my bout of depression with patients.
I have actually. I've spoken with a 14-year-old girl about her
Mm.
depression and suicidal thoughts. And it really was one of those situations where she was healthy gums for years, since I met her. And then years later, it was like a train wreck. And I'm like, what is going on? And she just unloaded everything on me. And I'm like, I care so much about you. I need to let your parent, like, I had to intervene and discuss it with her parents and make sure she was getting like the proper help. I'm like, I can't just hear all of this and say, okay, bye. Like, I really had to intervene with
Right.
the doctor and the parents at that point. And it, it actually like made me feel really good to try to be helpful and make sure that everybody, all the adults in her life were aware of the situation.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
how my
Wow.
depression when I was 16 got figured out is my pediatrician. Like I had been thinking that I was holding it together so well, and then like he asked me a question and I just completely broke down and I started crying and I couldn't stop crying for hours and hours, and you know, that started the conversation, and my mom found out that I had been cutting, and I started seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist all because of that conversation. So Joffrey, that conversation you had with her parents could have really changed the trajectory of her life.
I mean, you can only, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, um,
Yeah,
Hmm.
fingers
yeah,
crossed.
that's all we want to do is help people. That's why we're all hygienists, right? So we can help everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see, what are you thinking, Amanda? Do you have any questions here for Katie?
Um, I think, I mean, we've been talking as hygienists caring for our autistic patients, but what about like autistic coworkers? If you have somebody that you know is autistic, or maybe somebody that you're concerned about that they don't have a diagnosis, but there's a lot of signs and symptoms, how would you encourage kind of going about reaching out to a coworker?
I guess if it were impacting their job performance, or if it was somebody that I was close with, maybe that would be something
Mhm.
that comes up. I think it would be easy for me because I do have neurodivergence to be like, hey, I'm really struggling with my ADHD here today, or yeah, I'm really struggling with all these sounds. Like, so maybe it would be an easy conversation to bring up them, but I don't. Maybe I'm thinking too literally about this question, but I don't know that I would really talk with anybody I didn't feel close with about it, unless I could see that maybe it was something in the environment that was triggering them. Like if I noticed that every time they're in the sterilization room that they get really short and snippy with all of the sounds, maybe I'd be like, hey, have you ever thought about earplugs?
Mm.
Or um, but sometimes unfortunately you're not always best buddies with everybody on the dental team. So I don't think I'd feel safe enough to have that conversation with certain people.
That's fair. Yeah,
Okay.
that's,
Yeah.
I
Anything
don't,
else, Joffrey?
I'm thinking with the autism, like the big thing they kind of taught in school was that autistic patients don't always like to brush their teeth. But what are other like very dominant characteristic traits we could be more aware of?
So realistically, I think that probably all of us have an image of what is in our mind, and it might be those patients that are nonverbal and the patients that they have more sort of obvious support needs. Um, Maybe they have to stick to more of a rigid schedule and they have a caregiver, but not everybody presents like that. So everybody has different levels of support needs, and so there may be a lot of people in your life, even Amanda, like you alluded to, like maybe they just have some traits of autism and maybe they're just really good at masking it. And so it's not being found out because their symptoms aren't interfering with their life quite as much. So I guess a lot of I forget what your question actually was, Joffrey, um, but, we don't all kind of present the same way. So there are a lot of people in your life that you might know that are autistic that they don't even realize it yet.
Mm.
And I think one key kind of thing is that if you have a patient or a person in your life, you know, that frequently has these depressions. They're kind of cyclical. Maybe they come every few months or every few years and they just completely kind of fall apart. That could be autistic burnout. It could be from masking so heavily and trying to fit in and look typical and not wear the earplugs when you need them, or you know, not having the fidgets when you really need to use them, or like sitting still when, you know, you might notice that I'm swaying a lot, like sitting still when you really just want to move your body. All of that takes away your like internal battery. It kind of drains you. And so maybe it's those people who are just constantly falling apart every few months. They could just be having autistic burnout. So kind of looking at patterns of people might be a way that you can help to recognize that.
Hmm. That's interesting.
Oh, and another thing, yeah, a lot of people now, the kind of the view of autism, think about it. Autism was usually young little boys. They kind of stereotype. They love trains. They have very limited diets, you know, but we're not all like that. And I'm a woman who went 35 years, nobody knew. They just slapped this label on me. Oh, she's depressed. And it was really confusing to me because I've been depressed for 19 years and it's never gone away. And I get off my medication and then I'm like falling apart again and not wanting to live. And it's like, why is this like this? I've been to doctors asking, do I have dysthymia, which is like low level depression? Do I have chronic fatigue syndrome? Because none of my friends like deal with this. And so, you know, autism can be a lot of different things.
Oh, that's very insightful, Katie. Very
Yeah.
insightful.
Yeah. But with the rise of social media and all of these like mental health accounts that I was telling you about earlier, you're going to have a lot of patients that are coming in that maybe they're self diagnosing. The fact is, here in the United States, getting yourself a diagnosis, cost of healthcare is very expensive. A lot of our patients that are like turning 26 and getting kicked off of mom and dad's insurance, they don't have a doctor. And trying to get a diagnosis for even ADHD is very cost prohibitive, it's expensive. Um, it's taking me a year to get my evaluation, you know, and so you're going to have a lot of patients who are like, I identify with a lot of what I'm seeing online, like this is what I think I have. And so you kind of have to be open to it, even if they don't have a medical diagnosis confirming this, like, okay, well, based on what you're telling me, let's offer this to you as a solution. um, like, offer some oral hygiene modifications for them if brushing their teeth is hard. They don't need to have a medical diagnosis for us to be able to help them
Mhm.
perform their self care in an easier way for them.
That's a good point,
I feel like I really
actually. Yeah,
rambled on
you don't
that
need
one.
to
I'm
have a
sorry.
diagnosis. We can
No,
give good home care
that was
tips.
such great information.
Yeah, especially TikTok, like the people on there talking about their self-diagnoses, and it's in the autism community, self-diagnosis is valid. You're going to find very few people who are going to be like, you're not autistic because a doctor didn't diagnose you, because a lot of the medical establishment still thinks of autism as the little boy who's nonverbal and loves trains. They're not factoring in, you know, people like me. Sia, the singer, just came out as autistic the other day. Dan Aykroyd, the actor, he's autistic. Daryl Hannah. There's a lot of people in our lives that are autistic that you just may not know about.
Well, speaking
Mhm.
about social media, I love your page. And one of your recent posts that I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. And I was glad you had posted it, was like, polish isn't for everybody. And you had like a picture of the beach, like, do you want a bunch of sand in your mouth? And I'm like,
Mm.
oh, I never thought about that way before. So I love your posts. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're putting awareness out there. I'm glad that it's humorous sometimes. Like I love what you're doing.
Mhm.
I'm trying. Social media is so hard though with this algorithm, and I'm almost thinking maybe I just need to start from scratch with a new account because it's just crazy.
I
It's a
I
different
don't get the
topic for a different
algorithms
Did
day.
either.
you is it yeah, I'm all
You
that will
can't
be a whole
compete with
different
it.
one, but is it your personal account that you kind of morphed into a dental account?
No, so it was actually in 2020 that I started my original account, Healthy Teeth for Tots. And so, really, it started out as I wanted to educate people on kids' oral health. And, like, I see so many adult patients who have dental anxiety, and like they started out as scared little kids who needed a lot of dental work and they had bad dental experiences. So, I really wanted to try to educate parents on ways that they can help their child have better dental experiences, reduce decay, and the account got pretty big. Like I started getting mentions from like Romper. It's a parents magazine and stuff, but it started to kind of take on a life of its own. And then I started getting overwhelmed with it. So what did I do? I completely abandoned it. I had 7,000 followers at that point, and I'm like, I'm just gonna walk away. Like, this is too much. And I went through autistic burnout. I did have a lot of life changes happening at that point. I was 9 months pregnant. I had moved. My son was undergoing an ADHD diagnosis. So it was like a really hard time, but I was 3 weeks away from having my baby, and I was like, I don't want to live anymore. Like, it was just too much.
Mm.
And so once I figured out that I have autism, I was like, you know what? I feel good. I feel like I know myself now, and most of the stuff that I really enjoyed on Healthy Teeth for Tots was the stuff about highly sensitive kids, and I identified as highly sensitive for years before I knew I was autistic. But I really liked being able to educate on things like how Profi paste can be disgusting for some people, and bubblegum is a gross flavor. Like, I don't like bubblegum; it's disgusting. Sorry to anybody who likes it, but not everybody likes those things. And so anyway, I changed Healthy Teeth for Tots. It became Spectrum RDH. But now I'm thinking maybe I should just leave Healthy Teeth for Tots, all that material up, and maybe I should just create a new account, Spectrum RDH, because my my audience right now is still like a lot of those parents, and not all of them identified with having highly sensitive kiddos. Not all of them have neurodivergence, so they're probably feeling pretty put off by the content I'm putting out, and it's tanking me in the algorithm because of it. So my
Mm.
engagement, you have to think about things like engagement. My account engagement is very low.
Well, if you started a follow a new one, I'll be your first follower because I love your content.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be your second.
Oh yes.
Well,
Well,
Katie,
do we
every
want
time
to do our closing questions?
yes, let's do it. Katie, every time we end
Okay.
these, we always ask everyone the same questions. So I'll always ask,
Okay.
what topics or concepts do you wish you had learned in school that you learned later in
Okay.
practice? Something that took you some time to figure out.
Okay. I actually wrote down my answers to these things because I wanted to try to stay on topic. Okay, so for me, I wish there was more education on how to talk to patients. Like, even if that could have been maybe not a competency because I don't perform well with role play, but just like with scripting, if they could have given us like scripts to use with our patients, that would have been so helpful for me as an autistic person because I pick up a lot of what I do by mimicking other people. So if I see something that I see is working well with patients, like it's like, that's gold. So some of the things, the verbiage that I use with my patients now are things that I remember my instructor saying in school, or like dentists that I work with that I really liked, or other hygienists. So I pick up on those things and then I make them my own. But I think it would have been helpful to have some of that verbiage starting out as a new hygienist because I was essentially starting with a very limited capacity to talk to my patients in a way that didn't sound
Mhm.
super textbooky. And I didn't know how to make it my own and make it sound relatable. And I think it would have eliminated a lot of uncomfortable conversations about like periodontal disease. I had a patient once, she's like, oh my God, am I going to die? And I'm like, no. So clearly I made it sound a lot worse than it was. But, I was just going by what the textbook said and I was explaining it using a lot of jargon. And I think that I could have had a lot, fewer of those interactions if I was just armed with better verbiage.
I think that's a common struggle, but I'm going to say you were probably more effective if people were fearing for their lives instead of saying, but is insurance going to cover it? So I say that was pretty good.
They were willing to pay. They were willing to cover this. Let's get
Life
this
or
taken care
limb,
of.
apparently.
And Katie, I wanted to tell you, so when I go speak with hygiene students, that's a big portion of my presentation
Uh-huh.
is how to discuss periodontal disease with patients.
Good.
I give them a
Yeah.
whole bunch of like random scenarios, and then I give them how I'm going to talk to the patient about it. So I just go through all these examples with them, and I hope it's helpful. They seem to enjoy it when I'm talking about it, but I'm trying to get that message out to as many hygienists on like how to make it simple for patients, how to make it simple for yourself
Mhm.
to talk to
Yeah.
them about it.
Yeah, and I guess it is a balancing act between like you want it to be a serious conversation. This is important. It's impactful about their health, but yeah, you don't want it to be so serious that they think they're going to die. But yeah, and to make it sound natural and to make it come out. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into these conversations. It really is.
And you know, the office I'm at right now, I'm having the opportunity to work with a lot of patients who don't speak English, and I find myself
Mhm.
using Google Translate a lot. So I just will type everything in English and
Mhm.
then hit translate. And I think there's something really like powerful about that, but also it has that scare factor on it, and I'm trying to figure out how to fix that with my translations because it really Google makes it sound super super serious. Like even if it's like slight periodontal disease, the Google Translate,
Mhm.
they're like you said, like, are we gonna be okay? Like I'm like, no, 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 you're gonna be
Yeah.
okay. So
You gotta
I'm
backtrack.
trying to work on my Google Translate to get that so it sounds like me, and it doesn't right now. So I'm currently working on that.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
it's like those car conversations. Does anybody here have like car conversations with themselves? You just talk out loud. That would be something where I'd be like trying to have this conversation and use Spanish language, and I would be trying to, I guess, come up with sentences that sound natural and I feel confident to get my message across so that I don't feel quite so put on the spot when faced with those situations.
Yeah, because I'll type it. I want to try to keep it short, right? I can't like go
Uh huh.
forever. So I'm like, you have periodontal disease. We need to do like this special cleaning for you, get the bacteria out. And wow, when you hit play, Google makes it sound like the world is ending. I'm like, oh no, that's not what I meant to say.
I'm the queen. Well, I feel like I come up with a lot of like dental product ideas, and now I see a lot of them coming out with the dental hygiene influencers, and I'm like, I thought of that 5 years ago. But that would be a great idea for somebody who speaks Spanish language if they put out material for us who speak English for how we can have these conversations with patients.
Yes, because the audio is so powerful, you know, like to hit play and then they can hear it rather than just like reading
Hmm.
it, right? If I had something like material written for them and then they read it, something about
Hmm.
that, like being able to hear it, makes those
Hmm.
connections
In a
like,
human voice too.
mhm.
Sounds like a project for the Latina RDH.
Yes, I really enjoy her content.
Likewise, I
Mhm. She
actually
yeah, I do too.
sat through one of her classes. She's fantastic.
All right,
Maybe
last
you'll sit through one
question.
of mine one day, hopefully.
We look forward to it, Katie. Okay, last question. What piece of
Mhm.
advice do you wish you could go back and give yourself as a new graduate?
Okay, so this is the advice that I shared with all of our second year students that were graduating this year. And it's just don't compare yourself to your classmates. Some of those people have become your friends. Like, just because you're friends and you like a lot of the same things doesn't mean that the practice setting that works for them is going to work for you. You are a unique individual with your own needs and limitations, and but you also have your own strengths. And so if you don't find an office that works for you right away, don't give up. Don't be mean to yourself. Um, just be patient, and will. find the office that's the right fit for you. Just going to take a little trial and error and maybe a little growing pains, but you'll find your place in the world.
Oh, beautifully
That's
said.
such great advice. I love these questions that we ask because the advice that we get from everybody is so fantastic.
It is. Katie, I just want to thank you again. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight.
Yeah.
We just value your time and love all the insight that you brought to the table tonight. So thank you, thank you,
Mhm.
thank you.
Thank you. No, this is good to be putting stuff like this out for our
It
community.
is.
Yes. All right. Let's see here.